Anthony Joshua, Francis Ngannou, March 8th. Let's talk about it. So Anthony Joshua and Francis Ngannou are going to fight. And we are feeling how about it? I guess we're in the middle to some degree. How First thing you got to do is accept that this is where we are. That the heavyweight division that we've seen over the last few years, it's coming to an end. And that's what happens. Guys kind of age out eventually. Fights wear on them, and eventually it's over, right? So you look at a guy like Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder lost the other night, maybe 2 weeks ago. Deontay Wilder lost to who Deontay lose to? Let's look it up quickly. But yeah, Deontay loses the other night to Joseph Parker. So Anthony Joshua beats Joseph Parker. Deontay Wilder loses to Joseph Parker. But the fashion in which he lost, it looks like he can't compete in this division anymore. It feels like he's aging out and he's kind of timing out. Like every fighter has a shelf life. Every athlete, every person. It's just for athletes, it's a lot shorter. For fighters, that wear and tear weighs on them. And after a while, I can't do this forever. So once I'm at that point, what do I do now? Do I stay in there and continue to take damage, or do I move on? Now we look at a guy like Deontay Wilder. Is he ready to move on? Is it time for him to move on, or was it just a bad matchup? We'll look at the rest of the landscape of the heavyweight division. He's already fought Tyson Fury 3 times, so that's not happening again. He fought Joseph Parker. He lost. Okay, fine. Andy Ruiz is still a good fight for him. Interesting fight. We'll say not good fight. Interesting fight for him. Anthony Joshua is still an interesting fight for him. Past that, I think everyone else is a dangerous fight and not a big enough bag for him to stick around for it. So I think he has 2 fights left at that level, and then why not leave? I'm a heavyweight. I've been doing this for a while. He has over 40 fights. And Deontay Wilder has done what he needed to do for his legacy. I'm sure a lot more people, the people who doubt him are never going to not doubt him, because fundamentally he's not the greatest boxer. So they're like, oh, he's a one-hitter quitter. But if you one-hit quit 40-something times, not much we can say, right? It's like saying he's a one-hit wonder, but he has 41 hits, and it doesn't work out. It doesn't add up. So Deontay Wilder is someone who maybe 2 fights left. I think he's got to get out of here. There's not much left for him to do in the heavyweight division. Which brings us to an interesting crossroads for Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, who are the other 2 in the division, like the 2 premier heavyweights. Well, Anthony Joshua has been on a pretty good streak recently. After losing to Usyk twice, which Usyk's a bad matchup for him, he's gone on a decent tear. He's kind of reclaimed his, not what he had prior to the losses, like the one to Andy Ruiz and the Usyk fight, but he's kind of re-established himself as, if not one, obviously not one, 2 in the division right now. Just based on name itself, Tyson Fury is still the number 1 in this division, which brings us to the fight now. Francis Ngannou knocked Tyson down. He made it an interesting fight. I wasn't very interested in the fight itself. I have to be completely honest. That's why I didn't even really report on it or really want to even tune in necessarily, but it's still heavyweight boxing, so you got to watch it. I think Francis did well enough. Like he knocked down the champion. It was his first boxing match, and he didn't embarrass himself. He did a great job. But that fighter is tailor-made for someone who doesn't necessarily understand. This is heavyweight boxing, so what are we thinking? Knockouts. Tyson Fury's not really a knockout. Not really. He's not a knockout artist. He knocked out Deontay partially because of the weight difference and was just a much better boxer. So you could have thought maybe the same thing would have happened to Francis. Francis is a much bigger man than Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder hits hard, but he doesn't carry that weight the same as like an AJ or a Francis or even a Tyson Fury, because that's why they have weight classes, right? He's walking around he's walking into the ring. His heaviest I think was 225, and that was substantially heavier than he's ever walked into the ring before. So, and he lost that fight. So I mean, it's an interesting time for the heavyweight division because legacies can be rejigged a little bit here. We had Anthony Joshua after the Ruiz fight. He looked shaky, and I think everyone was like, "Oh, he's a pretender, and he's not who maybe we thought he was." We had a vocal people like Lennox Lewis who came out and said what he said. I mean, Lennox has never really been a fan of AJ, so I wouldn't expect him to really support him in in a situation like that. But as soon as that happened, it was time to, I don't want to say dogpile, but questions. Of course, we're gonna have questions. I even had questions. Does he want to do this still? It didn't. We can't know if he still has the fight in him. Only the fighter can know that. We can look from the outside and speculate and assume and say things, but we don't actually know. Anthony Joshua showed us that he still has fight in him and he still wanted to fight. He still wanted to compete. And I think he had to recenter himself, which is what he probably did after those tough losses. The Usyk fights, those were dreadful for him. He didn't present well. He looked like he couldn't figure him out at all. So then you're looking at it like, well, where does he go from here? Where does AJ go if this is the highest level and now he's lost twice, well, 3 times at this point? What happens here? Well, if you still have the fight in you, you can still get up for it, and you can still, your team is still strong enough, then you can still go out there and do what you have to do, which is obviously what AJ's done. Now, he finds himself in this fight with Francis. I don't think it goes the way that the Francis and Tyson Fury fight went. Tyson Fury's not a puncher. Tyson Fury can punch, and Tyson Fury's a great boxer. But Anthony Joshua is a heavy-handed fighter. And I don't think Francis possesses the skills to get away from these punches. So if AJ hits him clean, and AJ's looking, that's the other thing. It's not just, if he hits you clean. Tyson Fury wasn't looking to knock you out necessarily. Tyson Fury is more of as big as he is, he's a finesse boxer. He's on his toes. He uses his jab. He stays on the outside. Now with Deontay Wilder, he mixed it up. But no disrespect to Deontay, he's not fundamentally a great boxer. He's a great fighter, not fundamentally a great boxer, which made it much easier for Tyson once he understood what Deontay was bringing to the table, obviously after the first fight. So this will be interesting, but not that interesting. I think AJ gets him out of there. AJ beats him up, I think. The only chance Francis really has is if AJ just kind of stands there and they throw back and forth, which I think Anthony's smart enough now to understand. Not that he wasn't smart before, but I think he understands now. Can't do that like he did with Ruiz. He hit Ruiz, he hurt Ruiz, and he figured, I'll just get him out of here. Sometimes you still have to pace yourself, right? Especially heavyweight boxing. One shot can get you out of there, or change the fight completely, which is what happened with AJ and Ruiz. So, Lennox Lewis was vocal. Lennox Lewis had a few things to say about the AJ fight with Francis. He essentially said Francis's fight with Tyson Fury was a spectacle. This fight with AJ is also a spectacle, he said, right? Which is, to some degree, is fair. I think Francis is trying to make as much money as he possibly can. And that's what prize fighting is, right? That's what these guys do. They're supposed to try to maximize their window. While they're able to get it done, let's make as much money as we possibly can. It's not like sitting here talking to you guys. You could do this till you're 75, or look at Larry King. You could do this forever, but that's not the fight game. So Maximize, get as much money as you can. He left the UFC obviously for a very similar reason. He felt like he wasn't being compensated. So he comes to boxing, and what do? I make spectacles. That's what pay-per-view boxing is. It has to be a spectacle. We need that. So, okay. Francis' fight with Tyson was a spectacle. Hats off to Ngannou for making the most of his opportunity. He's done nothing wrong. This is just heavyweight division in the year 2024, which is 100%. 100%. In my opinion, this fight adds zero credibility to AJ's resume. He's supposed to win this fight, and when he does, what does he gain or learn by beating Francis? Fair. I mean, not all criticism is even if I hate you, I might have fair criticism. But like he said, that this is what heavyweight boxing is in 2024. We have social media influencers anytime we say that, someone jumps to Jake Paul. To be fair, yes, but he's like the Michael Jordan of the influencers when it comes to boxing. He's the Muhammad Ali. Oh, that's kind of disrespectful, but you get where I'm going with this. Jake Paul can actually box, and though he's strategically picked his opponents, he's had better opponents than a lot of these other, because a lot of the influencers are just fighting each other, which is fair. It's like celebrity boxing, right? It's like celebrity boxing. We saw this in the 90s and early 2000s. Boxing has always had a spectacle element. And I think we just, have to accept it and learn to incorporate it. There's nothing wrong with adjusting to the times. So yes, it is a little bit irritating to see some of these events take place. 100%. I think KSI is a terrible, quote unquote, boxer. He's horrible. He looks athletic, but he's not good at boxing at all. It looks like he doesn't spend any time. He spends more time planning the event and picking an opponent and antagonizing them on social media, and not even close to enough time actually training the sport. And that's why I do give Jake Paul somewhat of a pass, although he's handpicking fighters who are obviously not boxers. But it's a spectacle. He's leaning heavily on the spectacle piece. Okay. But this is what it is. And this is what it's going to be for the foreseeable future until we get. What would be nice to see is the fighters take a page from the social media guys. For example, Gervonta Davis. When he fought Ryan Garcia, that was, if not the biggest pay-per-view of last year of boxing, it was one of the biggest pay-per-views. Why? Because social media and Ryan Garcia helped promote that fight. Gervonta Davis wasn't rigid in his presentation where he couldn't say anything. He was funny enough. He was angry at moments. There was a reason to put a camera on him. So the promo was good. Building up to the fight was good. Ryan's a superstar. Whether you like him as a boxer or not, he's a superstar. Okay. Gervonta showed that he also is a superstar not outside of boxing, but he's a boxing superstar. And other than that, we only have Canelo as a superstar. That moment showed that those guys can maybe be superstars, but you needed those two stars to make that moment. Canelo's a little bit different, where he can kind of make a moment with a much lesser star. But those guys have dabbled. So you've seen Jake Paul and Ryan Garcia and that community intertwine. You've seen Gervonta on some of these lesser known, more YouTube social media driven outlets like the Caleb Presley, where it was more of like a comedic thing. That has nothing to do with boxing. They didn't even talk about the fight really, but that's where we are. That's where people's eyes are. So you want some interest? Then do that. Why does everybody show up after school to watch the kids fight? Well, one, it's a fight, so everybody's going to show up, but they've been talking about it all day. After school, 3:00. I don't know. I'm not in school anymore. But you get it. The idea is you promo this thing. You present something that we are enticed by, and then we show up for it. So I want the fighters to, this year, spend a little bit more time taking a page out of their book, out of the social media guys' books. Instead of us, the older fighters, because even in this quote with Lennox, he didn't actually say anything wrong, and although of course it will be framed as hate because he doesn't have the greatest relationship with AJ. He didn't say anything that is wrong here. This is boxing in 2024. It doesn't add anything to his legacy. What credibility does he actually gain? Fair. All of that very, very fair. Not necessary to say, but fair, right? So let's accept it, let's incorporate it, and let's make boxing great again. But yeah, so am I excited for the Francis fight, or the Francis and AJ fight? No, but it would be good to watch heavyweight boxing. It's never a bad thing to watch heavyweight boxing. So yeah, it'd be good to see AJ, and you never know. It's heavyweight boxing. You never know. You never know. So that's where we're at with that right now. Now the Deontay Wilder loss, ooh, it hurt. It hurt, didn't it? Him, at least. He got beat up pretty badly. Zhang, Deontay books, co-main event. So it looks like on that card, on that same Anthony Joshua Francis Ngannou card, is going to be the Zhang Bang. Zhang Zili is going to be fighting Joseph Parker, who we obviously discussed a little bit earlier. Just recently had the big win over. Excuse me. Had the big win. It's cold. Had the big win over Deontay Wilder. He's going to be fighting Zhang, the Zhang Bang. I'm just gonna call him Zhang, just because that's the name I can say most comfortably, right? So let's go Zhang. So Zhang versus Joseph Parker is going to be the co-main event for that card in March 8th. So that will be an interesting fight. Zhang's been on a pretty good streak recently, 2 knockouts or 2 wins, excuse me, over the Englishman. Joyce, excuse me, Joe Joyce. Oh, he slipped my name. I mean, I don't know, but yeah, Joe Joyce takes those 2 L's. So Zhang's on a pretty good streak right now. He's an older fighter. That's the thing. And that's the thing with heavyweight boxing. The last thing to go is your power. So as long as you're not taking too much damage and you can kind of steer clear of some of those fights there's fights that change you. There's fights that completely change the trajectory of your career. So Zhang's 40. He's not a young boy at all by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. He's definitely a little bit older, but he's been on a nice little streak recently, which is kind of well, I mean, those 2 wins over Joe Joyce kind of put him into a great position. A great position. Just prior to that, he had lost to Philippe Hergoff, who's a big puncher himself, unanimous decision. But those 2 Joe Joyce wins really put him kind of in the spotlight and kind of showed what he can do. Now, Joe Joyce, I think, personally, I never really got on the Joe Joyce train. I didn't understand it. I don't think he's a great fighter. I don't think he's a good fighter. I think he's okay. I think he's a big man who hits relatively hard and understands boxing to a certain level. But I don't think he's a good fighter. And I think Zhang kind of showed that. Like, even in those fights, Zhang was just kind of timing him and hitting him with huge shots, which kind of very similar pattern of setting up these shots. These kind of, the right hand was huge, hook was huge. I think he knocked him out with a hook. And it was rough. It was rough. So Joe Joyce has some soul searching and some digging to do himself, but Zhang is on a pretty good streak. Now, the fight with Joseph Parker will be interesting because Zhang is a much bigger man than Deontay Wilder was. But Joseph Parker has been in there with monsters, obviously. I think Zhang hits hard, and it's going to be a tough night for both of them. I don't think that fight, I think that's a 50-50 fight when you look at what they bring to the table. Zhang, the confidence he's feeling right now, I'm especially in combat sports, but in anything, you start stringing together a couple wins, all of a sudden you start feeling good. You're that guy, right? And I think Zhang has reason to feel like he's that guy right now. So he's going to go into that fight with tremendous confidence, but Joseph Parker is also going into that fight with tremendous confidence. He beat up on Deontay Wilder. He's been on a bit of a streak himself. He did beat obviously Deontay Wilder, Simon Keane. He had a few miscellaneouses here. He lost to Joe Joyce. Funny enough, was it 2022? Yeah, he lost to Joe Joyce end of 2022 himself by KO. And that's why I say I think it's going to be a tough fight for Joseph Parker because Zhang hits, if not as hard, maybe a little bit harder than Joe Joyce. So tough fight for both guys, but I do think Zhang ends up getting the win. I think Zhang is the bigger man beats the smaller man when they're pretty much similar skilled. So I see Zhang taking that fight and setting up a bigger fight with an AJ maybe after that. I can see an AJ Zhang fight maybe end of 2024 if we don't get Deontay, if we don't get one of the big names like Deontay versus AJ, which I don't see Deontay coming off of this loss getting that fight with AJ. So he's gonna have to string together at least one or two more wins, which I think timeline-wise doesn't necessarily work for him. So it makes it interesting. I can't see Deontay fighting till 2026 successfully. I think he is coming to the end of. I think he's coming to the end of his career. Maybe 2024 is the end. You can't speak for a boxer. You don't know what's inside of them, but I think he's accomplished enough. He can walk away and not. Other than the AJ fight, he didn't duck anybody. I mean, there was nobody really duck in his era, really. So, yeah, Deontay, I think, has one or two big fights left in him. I would hate to see him in there with like a. He hits so hard that I think even a Zhang Deontay fight is bad for Zhang, maybe. Because all it takes is one shot, and you're a huge target. So Joseph Parker, who's a little bit smaller, or a little bit, I don't want to say smaller, he's a little bit shorter than those guys, a little bit smaller. He's not as big of a target as a Zhang who's walking in there 6'6", 6'7", with another man who's about 6'8", 6'9", 6'8" ish. Yeah, that's it's going to be an interesting year. I think this is kind of 2024, 2025 is where we kind of see everything kind of shake out. And some of these guys who have been hanging around the heavyweight division at the top will kind of fall off. So like the Joe Joyce loss, I think those two losses changed him. Those were two huge losses. He was beat up. So yeah, I see this year being a kind of settling of the dust, and we get to see who's kind of at the top and who's not. I think an interesting heavyweight prospect this year will be, and when I say prospect, it's funny because a lot of these guys aren't that young, But Frank Sanchez. Not too sure how many of you are actually familiar with Frank Sanchez. I actually posted one of his shorts recently. He did. He's a Cuban fighter. Knockout. Last fight was a knockout of Junior Fa. So he's someone who's been making a name in the division. He's actually a really skilled heavyweight. He's someone I could see making a lot of noise this year in the heavyweight division. So look out for Frank Sanchez. Heavyweight division, Cubano should be an interesting year for him. 24-0, 6-4. Let me see. Yeah, Junior Fa was his last big win. Before that, obviously Scott Alexander, Daniel Martz. No major names on his resume. If F.A. Ajagba, I don't know if you guys remember the African who's running through everyone for a little while there. He did beat him by decision, giving F.A. his only loss really. But yeah, no, Frank is a super skilled heavyweight. It's going to be an interesting year to see what he's able to get done. Hopefully politics don't get in the way of anything. And yeah, it should be a good year for boxing overall. Maybe Haney moves up to heavyweight to try to avoid that whole 140 mess too. You never know.